Okay, so I'm just going to preface this by saying this episode is hands down probably my least favorite episode, not only of this show, but probably of any show I watch. It is emotional, it's painful, it's an important episode, but it's very hard to watch. So I really don't know how much I'm going to have to say about this. This is season 3, episode 16, with tired eyes, tired minds, tired souls. We slept. Let's get into it. I will say Jimmy's opening statement, or the recap of his time capsule confession. It is emotional because you do feel for him. Like, there are so many people in schools, past and present, that can relate to those emotions. Of course, that does not justify what he does. Pulling out the gun, shooting at the guys who beat him up in the parking lot and messed with his locker that morning. I mean, I get the anger, but and it's just crazy because you see Peyton and Brooke see this before it happens, so the panic ensues. And Jimmy's like tucking the gun away and trying to run away. And Mouth is in the AV room with his headphones, doesn't know what's going on. This episode is really emotional, and it's just like, in the mess of it in the beginning, Peyton and Brooke get separated, and then here comes Whitey with Lucas and Nathan and the team, and we saw Haley locking herself with some other students in another room, and Brooke tells Lucas, "Hey, someone's shooting," and Whitey's like, "Everybody on the bus, back on the bus," but here comes Nathan looking for Haley, which is emotional for a different reason. Whitey's like, "Get on the bus, Nathan." And he's like, "Nope, running." Here comes Lucas tackling him. Like, "Get off me, dude." You gotta love Nathan's, like, just conviction. What was Rachel doing in the tutor center? Because it's like Haley, Skills, Rachel, and like they're sitting here like, "Oh, we're safe," but Jimmy's in there with them. I totally forgot that part. Yeah, Lucas makes a lot of good points. Heroes are usually dead. What are you gonna do, Nate? And he's like, "It's Haley, Lucas." Like, I see both of their points. Leave it to Peyton to be cut and bleeding and be like apologizing for losing Brooke, but I get it. Lucas, of course, finds Peyton in the library, so that it's like, of course, I feel like it comes back to that with Peyton, the misery chick, how she said, like, she was always having the dramatic things happen to her. Honestly, at this stage, I'm kind of wondering, where are the teachers? Where are the cops? Like, what's going on? Of course, Nathan finds Haley, and there's always one guy, "Don't open the door." Thank God Skills was there to put the kibosh on that. He was like, "Shut up, dude. Open the door, Haley." And of course, then we find out Jimmy has the gun. He's the madman, and now they're all stuck. It's interesting, isn't it? Like, Dan's like, "How did this happen?" "Well, I believe the school board you're on voted against the metal detectors." It's like, kind of funny. Jimmy is blaming everyone for moving on, and he's angry, and that's something that I think a lot of teenagers and even young adults feel. I think it's a very human reaction, but it's also important to know that you have to, like, step back and go, "Gee, maybe this was partly my fault too." And I do like that Rachel kind of calls him out on it. She's like, "Don't make him feel bad for living his life," in regards to Mouth, because Jimmy was very angry with Mouth. Skills is just coming in, knocking everybody's face. He's hitting everybody. I mean, he knocks out the guy who's trying to challenge Jimmy, and I get it. This is one of those. This episode is just hard to watch. I mean, Jimmy is so angry, and it's like, this is one of those times where therapy is so important I think therapy is important for everyone. Okay, but some are more important for some than others. Oh, that moment with Karen crying about Lucas. Oh my God. And the wording, I didn't even get to say goodbye. And Keith is like, you're not going to have to. It's like, this is so emotional because I know it's coming. I do appreciate the moment with the news reporter chick, like wanting to like, air, Jimmy's time capsule thing. And here comes Brooke. Little insensitive, don't you think? Just calling her out on it. And she's like, and who are you? I'm the student by, president. And she just like immediately gets her camera and Brooke's like, you should be ashamed of yourself, and walks away. There's always the one guy who, no matter the situation, can't see what's going on. They stay locked in their hate and their anger, and that kid is very much like, I don't care if he didn't kill anybody. I hope they fry his ass. And it's like, then the girl, is like, what's wrong with you? Why do you have so much hate in your heart, And that's a real thing in society too. Hey, Rachel's 700 days out of 20,000 or 30,000. Can't you see past that speech? I like that. Puts it into perspective. Yeah, Jimmy is angry. He didn't get into his college and he's tired. It's a lot. Again, therapy could have helped. Oh, Peyton's recollection of the tree fort she made with Brooke on a snow day when they were kids is so sweet. And I think we've all had a moment like that when we were kids, and just the moment of feeling safe and wishing you could stay there forever. She does have a point. They always try to make sense of tragedy after the fact. It is the human thing to do, and whether sense is made of it or not, I think is up to the individual. And we carry these things with us through our lives, whether they're good or bad, and they ultimately make us into the person we are. And it really depends on what we do with those experiences. That is what makes up our character as a person, I think. Oh, that's a moment between Peyton and Lucas. Her saying, if I love you, will you hold it against me? And kissing him and saying, just in case you can't keep your promise to keep me safe. Like, there's a lot of foreshadowing on that one too. The reporter asking Brooke, do you think America would tune in for people hugging each other? She's like, have you seen the ratings for Seventh Heaven? Nice plug, by the way, back in the day. But it's interesting how those reporters can turn the script, because she's like, let me ask you something. How much time have you spent with Jimmy Edwards? And it just made Brooke feel like crap. I still think the reporter should be ashamed of herself, honestly. And then a mom comes up and asks Brooke, have you seen Glenda? And she's like, I don't know who that is. And she's like, oh, let me go find her, because she's realizing how much she stays in her own circle of friends. Haley's saying she was supposed to be in current events right now, and Rachel's like, I think this counts. They're giving her some quips in this one. So Jimmy had attempted to kill himself, and he's saying, because of the day that no one noticed him. He said that was the best day, but then he attempted to kill himself, and then when he came back a little later, no one noticed. And this is, of course, making Mouth feel awful. Glenda's moment with Brooke was interesting because she just wanted her mom. She wanted to sit there and wait and let her mom wonder if something had happened to her, because she wants to know that her mom cares. And I think that's a feeling that a lot of teenagers and people in general can relate to. This moment of, Brooke calling Karen to go is because they won't release her without an adult. It's like, Keith really should have gone and went and got Brooke, because then he's like, it's okay, Karen, I won't let anything happen to our boy. And I'm just like, But of course, that embrace between Keith and Karen is seen by Dan, who's always lurking, and this fuels his anger. Oh, I love that. Haley's like, I wish you hadn't come for me. I love you for it, but I wish I knew you were safe. And he's like, I don't want to be safe without you. Oh, I love it. I like that, Jimmy tries to, be all like, oh, your worst place in this day, your worst day in this place would be my best. And I feel like Nathan at this point is kind of saying what a lot of us might have felt like, dude, come on, you know what you're doing is wrong. Get off of this. Like, he really calls him out. And then we find out the other girl is diabetic, and they're like, let her go, Jim, come on. Keith is begging Dan to get him into the school to talk to Jimmy. And it's like, this is such what, what Keith does and putting himself in danger for everybody else. And just like, no. And then like Jimmy's like freaking out because Nathan texted his dad letting him know, hey, Jimmy's the only one. So if anybody steps into that hall, they're going to die. And here comes Lucas carrying Peyton. So when the door slams as Lucas is carrying Peyton, it alerts Jimmy, and he's like, okay, I guess that's my cue. And everyone's like begging him not to go, and he's like, everyone's gonna remember me as a monster, but I wonder how they'll remember all of you. I will say Jimmy's acting is very compelling in this. He's very angry, and he confronts Lucas carrying Peyton, and he's like, the school's on lockdown, what are you doing? It's like, here comes Keith. Keith's final scenes. It is an interesting point that, the teenage mind is so wrapped in its own thinking that it does feel so very small. The world feels small, and they do feel, kids can feel trapped very easily. So I think this is making a good point of that. But it's interesting to see Keith say, I bought the gun. I've been where you are, and it does get better. And Jimmy's like, no, it doesn't. And oh God, Keith saying, I love you to Lucas as he carries Peyton out. I did forget that Jimmy shot himself. So this is where the titular moment, if you didn't think Dan was evil before, he is now. To stand there and just kill his own brother. I mean, and not only that, but blame Jimmy for it, as we know will happen later. This episode is a twist of emotions. It's hard to watch. I guess I had more to say about it than I thought I would. If you stuck with me this long, bravo. This episode is just the worst in so many ways. So yeah, let's talk about the podcast now. Okay, so this was a very emotional podcast, as I expected. And because the emotions were so incredibly real in this episode, and them not taking commercial breaks was pretty classy. I was glad to hear that I wasn't alone in the whole not liking this episode and knowing that people skipped this episode, because I completely understand that feeling. And it was really interesting to hear Hillary's thoughts on being a boy mom. And her perspective on this was pretty powerful. I can really understand why Hillary did not want to do this episode when she got the script. Completely understand that. And Columbine was a moment that I think affected just everybody in life. Suicide, from my experience, is ultimately due to someone hurting. And I say my experience because when I was 12, a family member that I was close to did commit suicide. So I understand that much for sure. I think it's really cool that Colin, aka Jimmy, could join this podcast. He does seem very fun. I can believe from what he said he didn't get treated very well. Hollywood is tough, and they do like what they considered to be the pretty people, as he said. And Colin did an amazing job in this role. And I can imagine it wasn't a fun role. And as he said, it sounded like a miserable filming experience, as Hillary said. And it just makes his performance in this all the more incredible. So to kind of get heavy for a second, for me, when it comes to the horrible acts in this world, it comes down to the hearts of man. From my experience, there's a lot of factors that go into every horrible act. And it's from the violence just in the world to entertainment, etc. So, I think the things that we allow into our minds, our hearts, our lives can sometimes take on a mind of their own. or a life of their own, I should say, because you do have to speak up because people aren't mind readers. And there is a time, especially as a teenager, you feel alone. And, I do strongly believe that if you don't have faith, belief in something concrete, something else will fall into that role. And that can kind of overtake our hearts and minds and lives. I think with all the documentaries that I've watched on cults, that really reinforces my stance on this point, because people do look to belong. And if you don't have faith in something, you will cling to things that sometimes aren't the best for you. I think the leaders, the people in authority, are kind of only part of the issue, as I really do believe it starts in the home. It starts with your mind, your heart, what you're dealing with in your life, and locally, community, that sort of thing. That's where it starts. And as I've kind of said before, the good and the bad, we have to take it. And it's really, it can sometimes, even the bad experiences can mold us, but it's truly what we do with that essentially forms us. So it's such a delicate balance. So it's like, I'm a major advocate for therapy. So, I'm always like, I think therapy is such a fantastic tool. So I'm very glad to live in an age when that is no longer a stigma and it's very much accepted. Okay, so going back, let's see. I really did kind of like Colin's reaction to, do you have kids? Oh, hell no, I can't even keep a plant alive. I think a lot of people can relate to that one. And I think everyone bullies. It doesn't just stop in high school, because I know that a lot of like work environments can be very high schooly. People in general can get very cliquish, very in there. It's all about the insecurities. We kind of project that onto other people in really terrible ways. So again, it goes back to like figuring out like who we really want to be, how we really want to project ourselves, So it is a delicate balance. Sophia was speaking a lot on the research that we've had through these horrible kinds of acts in history, and it's true. I mean, there are a lot of groups, a lot of types of different groups promote a very unhealthy mindset, and, it just comes at, people and children in so many different ways, especially now with the internet. So again, it's having a strong faith in something so that we don't cling to lesser things. I definitely agree we are very polarized now, which is not awesome. By the way, Colin's Spain trip sounds amazing. And again, I'm just going to say he really did do an amazing job in this performance. I can't imagine how difficult that might have been. And I can relate to Hillary. I was in the trench coat situation a long time ago. I did that too. I think kids always have that moment in their life where they realize that the world at large, and their world specifically, is not as safe as we once thought it was. And that's always really hard to have that realization. So kind of coming back to the heavy for a moment, I know from my personal experience that gun-free zones don't work. And because a person who doesn't follow the rules or is so far gone mentally, emotionally, they're not going to listen to a sign. They don't care about the rules. They've kind of given it all up. It's kind of like a person in suicide. They've just given up, but it's in a different direction with a person who wants to be violent. It is a cry for attention. It is a cry for out of pain. It is a cry for wanting power. There's so many things that go into that. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I do commend the schools that have trained vets and teachers and armed security, because they have managed to avoid such awful happenings. And I speak from experience, not necessarily on a school end, but I did know a girl in our circle that was murdered by two people she considered friends with a gun, and they buried her in a shallow grave. And that was a moment in my life being so close to my home, my world, that really reinforces the hearts of man thing. Because that was a real moment of, sometimes some people cannot be reached. But then again, I watch a lot of serial killer documentaries too. So I have to say that also reinforces my point that sometimes some people are just so far beyond any kind of help, unfortunately. But again, it's what we do with those horrible experiences that forge who we are. Taking the bad with the good is definitely a life lesson that I don't think ever goes away. And I just want to say the person who survived Columbine and was on the set and actually stayed and provided their experience for that, I have to say, bravo to you. That is so important. That's a very rock star move. The internet is a scary place. And again, if you don't have a firm belief, you can cling to a lot of the things that are out there, and there's a lot out there. And that, again, is just another lesson that I know I'm constantly tested on, because there's so many things in the world. It's so much coming at you, a lot of information all the time. We live in the age of information, so it can be extremely overwhelming. So on to the lighter. Being born in the 80s, I can totally agree. The 80s mom, books and bangs, I'm for it. And I have to agree, the one guy in the classroom that was kind of being jerky, it's really funny that they mention it because I could also see him being a really good Felix. I have to agree. I was kind of thinking that. So it's really funny. We all had the same thought on that one. I do agree that this is more of a suicide episode for sure. I was surprised that they didn't talk a little more about the Dan shooting Keith moment, but I do know they will be discussing that more in the Aftermath episode, which is next week. More sadness, not fun, I know. I think the 988 for mental health line for the mental health professional, this phone line is such a really cool idea. I think that is so great. And, it's really funny that Joy wants to dye her hair purple because I'm actually going to do the same thing for Halloween. Well, I'm going to see what it looks like. We'll see if I keep it. I don't know. It's a very experimental thing. I kind of did it a couple of years ago when I went to Salem, so we'll see how it looks. We'll see if I keep it. I don't know. Not all hair dyes work. Come on. As Sophia mentioned, I agree with her on that. So yeah, this one was a tough one, guys. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. Until next week.